Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for the Expanse Season 6, Episode 4, Redoubt. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of the Expanse, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for the Expanse up to Season 6, Episode 4. If you have not seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So, this was a little bit of a slow pace breather, which you do need sometimes after we had two very exciting episodes in the previous two episodes. So I understand that, and plus it's getting us, we need to take a breath before we get into the final two episodes of the entire show. So I feel like it is what's needed. Like, you can't have another plot heavy episode. You need to take a breath once in a while, and there were some great character moments, but other moments that kind of dragged a bit for me. So I didn't think this episode was as amazing as the previous two, but it was still, of course, really good. Every episode this season has been phenomenal, in my opinion. So anyway, let me start with the Laconia stuff, and this was actually my favorite episode thus far for the Laconia stuff. The opening sequence we get that tells the short story. We get a snippet every episode. Now, I do feel like in many ways I'm probably nerding out or fanboying out because I've read the books, and I feel like those who haven't read the books probably weren't as impressed or with this scene, because those who have read the books know the implications and what this is setting up, and we get Duarte! Now, if you haven't read the books, that means nothing to you, but those who have read the books have been waiting for Duarte to show up. Some thought he'd show up in Season 4, some thought he'd show up in Season 5, because he appeared in Book 5, so we thought, well, he's definitely going to be in Season 5, but he wasn't in Season 5, so I've given up hope on seeing Duarte until if they ever cover Book 7, 8, and 9, because, of course, that's when he's the main character. But we're introduced to him here. Now, I am slightly disappointed in that because the reason why I thought he wouldn't appear this season, because when he didn't appear in Season 5, I assumed that they were holding him back for if they ever covered Books 7, 8, and 9, so they could cast it then, and they wouldn't have to, because now, since they already cast Duarte, they're stuck with this casting. I was actually thinking they'd get like a well-known actor to play him, kind of like they got David Strathairn to play Ashford. I thought they might get someone of an equal caliber to play Duarte in the adaptations of the final 3 books, which is going to happen anyway. I mean, this scene alone like really sets up for it. If it doesn't happen, it's going to be the greatest disappointment in television history. But anyway, so now they're stuck with this casting, but he's a good actor. I like him for Duarte. He looks younger than I pictured Duarte to be, even in this time frame. I pictured Duarte to be a bit older, but he's good in the role. I could see him doing a really good job at the type of character he is. And he's a Toronto. I looked him up. He's a local Toronto actor, so I'm sure if they ever did adapt books 7, 8, and 9, that he would be available to reprise the role, because that would suck even more if they recast. But it is a bit iffy casting him in this early. But this is from the book. The conversation that he has with Kara in this episode is from the short story Strange Talks, although it's slightly different. I feel like in the book he seemed to be a bit more consoling to her, where here he seems to be a bit more thinking about his own issues, which is fine because it's a way of the show. It really sets up this character more and sets up what he's all about. That's why these adaptations of Book 7, 8, and 9 are going to happen. They must. Anyway, so, but it was a really touching moment too. Like, all book knowledge aside, that at the funeral of Duarte going up, and I don't know I guess showrunners or show only watchers who haven't read the books might be able to catch that this is the guy in charge. They did name drop him. It's not like he came out of nowhere. They name dropped him in season 5, although I doubt many people who only watch the show will remember that far because it was just a casual mention, and unless you've read the books, that would mean nothing to you, so it probably wouldn't stick. But at the end of season 5, when the Martian Splinter Group went out to Laconia, they did mention that their leader, the person who was in charge, who organized this whole thing, was a man named Duarte. Well, this is him. Winston Duarte. Also, you can tell, even if you have no context of the books, you could tell he's in charge just by the way Kotazar approaches him and calls him Admiral. You'd probably be able to figure out. And of course, you should recognize Kotazar. His character's been in the show since season 2. They showed him at the end of last season as that sociopath scientist who originally worked for Protogen that Dolls had captive in order to have collateral, something powerful to make him more powerful. But then last season we saw Marco's forces abducted him and gave him to Duarte, he's now the chief scientist in charge of doing all this crazy molecule experiments that they're doing on Laconia. And so when we see him go to Duarte, he's like, the sequence finally worked. I don't know specifically what he's talking about, even having read the books, but you get a gist. You can get a gist of that has something to do with protomolecule experiments and that they're making some headway with it. So also at the start of the scene, so we get the funeral for Kara's younger brother, Zan, who apparently his full name is Alexander. Felt weird when Duarte called him that. But anyway, I had closed caption on, so I could hear what all the other people were here because I could read it. I could read what all the other people at the funeral were whispering. I guess you can kind of make it out even without closed caption, but it made it more clear for me that they are saying, in fact, that Zan was hit by a Jeep. Or they call it a cart, but it's basically those Jeeps that we saw in episode 2. As I said, when I first saw that Jeep in episode 2, because I knew what was happening, I was like, oh, that's Chekhov's Jeep. He's setting it up for it's going to hit and kill Zan, Kara's younger brother. And they said something but in the closed captions, the people talking said something like that the cart flipped over. I'm not sure. But Duarte does mention that Zan ran in the middle of the road. So in the books, he ran in the road to get the soccer ball because he was playing soccer. That was set up in the previous episode, and the soccer ball went in the road, and the driver wasn't paying attention and hitting him. So it does seem like, even though they're not as clear, that they're basically saying that the same thing happened here. Also, the murmurs of the people at the funeral give you kind of a hint of the kind of society that Duarte is setting up here on Laconia, because they mention that the driver, even though he wasn't drunk or anything, he is going to face the firing squad for hitting the young boy and killing him. And Duarte is kind of doing that as a way to show appreciation to Zan's family, which is bit extreme, maybe. He just wasn't paying attention, but again, it perfectly illustrates the kind of society that Duarte is going to set up. Also, so when Duarte is talking to Kara, he makes an analogy of her, which I thought was kind of an asshole thing for him to do, but Kara seemed to not mind. But he makes the analogy of losing her younger brother to him losing Mars, which I suppose to him was just as sort of impactful and sad. And he talked about how it made him sad, and how instead of just looking at it as a loss, he tried to make it as a sacrifice. So he wanted to build something greater, which is again is setting up for what he's trying to do on Laconia, build something that's even better than Mars. And he talks about, again, he makes the analogy of Zan running into the middle of the road, of humanity running into the middle of the road with the ring gates, going headlong, and him thinking that he needs to to help them. He's saying that we always say that we'll make you safe, but we can't really do that. We can try. And he's like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to make you safe. And then Kara, puts a hand, holds his hand and says, keep trying to keep us safe. And that was a tender moment. And I think those who read the books, though, could see that there's actually something more sinister and dark about this moment, which might be lost on someone who hasn't read the books. Because again, it's kind of an insider thing, which is why maybe those who haven't read the books might not like this storyline, because they are missing something. But I loved it because it does hint at something more sinister, because of the way that Kara telling Duarte to continue to try to keep us safe. Because the way he tries to keep us safe, not so pleasant. Which, again, this is getting into book 7, 8, 9, really setting that up. We got to see the adaptation of them. Anyway, so I loved it, personally. I thought it was amazing. And then, of course, Kotazar coming in like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Like, that was cool. That's stuff that we didn't get in the books. But then, of course, we see Kara carting the dead body of her younger brother out into the forest. Gee, I wonder if where she's taking them has anything to do with those strange dogs that brought that bird back to life. Anyway, so I think it's turning out for great. I loved it. So then we move over to Ceres Station, where we see Sindrani apparently riling up the Belters, and we see Avasarala and the Martian captain, who I've given a lot of praise to in last week's discussion, although this week she is kind of being a bit bloodthirsty. And Avasarala has to hold her back a bit, because they have determined that it was definitely Belters that set off the bombs, and they were bombs. So the Martian captain wants to respond by sending a UNN Martian fleet straight to the ring gate to retake Medina Station. And Avasarala does not want to do that, because she says that would just illustrate to the belt that we're the conquerors again. So basically, I love this interaction. I love Avasarala's mindset, because she's definitely has changed, and she wants that the UNN and Martian, the way they treat the belt, she wants that to change as well. She can see that it needs to change, because what the Martian captain suggests is going back to business as usual. The inners ruling over and dominating the belt. And I think Avasarala can see that that's not working, that it hasn't worked, that it's led to this point, and that if they continue to do it, it will just fuel Marco's calls even more and create more strife and more conflict. So she very wisely says that that's not a good idea, that they need to elicit allies from the belt, that this needs to be a group effort. It can't just be the inners ruling over the belt again. This needs to be smart belters against extremists like Marco, and smart belters teaming up with the inners rather than the inners dominating all of the belt, which again is the exact correct approach to take. However, I don't think Avasarala is fully there yet. She still has some growth to go, and I think Monica Stewart is helping her with that, because we get the Monica Stewart where she's we see, because in the previous episode we saw her talking to the Belter, and they were just speaking Belter with no subtitles, so we had no idea what they were saying. Here they have it dubbed in English, so like they would do in a newscast, and so we can hear what they're talking about. And it was so cute. They're talking about a cat that the man nicknamed Lucky Earther, which was a lovely moment. And then he talks about how he doesn't care about the conflict. He just wants water. He doesn't care about the fighting. He just wants it all to stop. And it was a really powerful podcast, but of course, Avasarala was against it because she thought it made Earth and Mars look weak. And then Monica Stewart's like pointing out that's exactly right, and it should. And that's how we're going to reach the Belters. That's how we're going to appeal to the Belters, not by being strong and dominant, because that is what's off-putting to them. We need to appear vulnerable because we are. And I think that message has gotten through to Avasarala, and I think Monica has been a really good influence on Avasarala, so I think this is going to help her even more to make the right decisions. So yeah, so this stuff was all really great too. So now let's get to the Rosnate. We had a nice little moment with Bobby and Amos. Again, these two bonding throughout the season is great, and we see them doing repairs and listening to Alex's music, and they bring up the fact it was Alex's music and reminisce about him. So that was a nice little moment. But moreover, we get into the repercussions of Holden disarming the missile that could have killed Marco Naris. And Clarissa finds out about it and tells it to Amos, and then while Amos and Holden are doing repairs on the exterior of the ship, we get this confrontation between them, which was just beautiful. It was so intense. It was just so great. And the way that Amos was really pressing Holden about it, and I'm like, well, if we're not here to kill Marco, why the hell are we here? Like, what are we doing this for? And Holden, it's just gets very defensive, and it's like, I'm the captain, I don't need to explain myself to you. And I love what Amos says. I can't remember the exact quote, but he says something along the lines of, well, are you pissed off because I question your authority, or are you pissed off because you don't have a right answer for me? And the question was, why did he do it? And that was a great moment. And the fact that Holden didn't respond to him kind of answers Amos that the second thing he said was true. That he doesn't have an actual answer, and that's why he's getting defensive. So that was an amazing moment. And then following that, Holden does feel the need to confess to Naomi about what he did. And I love how when Holden was first bringing it up, I was talking about Philip, saying Philip looks a lot like you, and Naomi's response was like, why are you talking about this? Because it's a very sore, tender subject for her, and she's like, why the hell are you bringing this up? And then he mentions, yes, I'm the one who disarmed the missile because I couldn't be the one that killed your son. And I think what he said made a lot of sense. Like, you may think you're okay with it, but, having to sleep in the same bed with the man that killed your son is going to haunt you. And I couldn't be that. It was a very powerful moment. And I love how when Naomi at first was saying, you can't just stop trying to make decisions for me, and saying at first, well, now I'm going to feel responsible for every person Marco kills from now on because I'm the reason why you didn't kill him. But I love how Holden finally calls her out. It's like, look, you need to admit that you're in pain. I see the pain you're in every time we kill a Belter ship. And the time you spent on the Pella really affected you, and you need to acknowledge that. It was such a strong moment between these two. So that was great, too. So then I also love the scene where Clarissa talks to Holden when they're alone. And because at first Bobby's in the room, and Clarissa, she's talking about how the missile's a dud, and Clarissa plays along. And once Bobby leaves the room, she's like, I see no reason for her to know. Because you can tell Bobby would have even bigger issues than Amos did with Holden if she found out. Huge, Holden getting the crap beat out of him issues. So it's probably the wise move not to tell her. But then Clarissa explains her motivations more, telling Holden that she's actually on his side, and she talks about the people she's killed and when she decided to stop killing, and how much it haunts her. She said that some people she killed she thought deserved it, other people didn't deserve it, but they all haunt her just the same. And then told Holden that never regret the decision not to kill. God damn it, that was such a powerful moment. And again, it shows more bonding between Holden and Clarissa, and frankly, more bonding between them that was in the books, which I love that they're exploring their relationship more in the show. And the way Holden says that's good advice. Like, it's just, God, it was such a good moment, such a powerful moment. And I think it did make Holden feel better, Clarissa saying that to him. So, yeah, that was all good stuff. So now, next we get into the drummer storyline, which I have in my notes labeled, "You son of a bitch, I'm in." Because here we see her pull off the heist or whatever. It was more of just like stealing food, which they thought would be unprotected, but there were some of Marco's men hidden there that they had to contend with. And I love the sort of discussion between Walker and Joseph at the start, where they're talking about how, Marco has tons and tons of wealth here, and that he's withholding it from the belt, and that it makes him not a very good guy. And then Walker's just like, yeah, what's the use of being a revolutionary if you can't get rich off of it? Which, again, helps describe Marco's mindset. But then, of course, they do pull off the heist, but Joseph loses his arm, which was a very powerful, harrowing scene. And again, it shows how, because they were talking, it really kind of speaks to how Joseph was saying that Micho shouldn't be there, that she can't hack it, and yet she was crucial as a medic. Her skills as a medic were crucial, and she was actually showed a lot of strength and a lot of being able to stay in hard situations by being able to like rip off his arm at the last moment when she realized that's. And it was such a powerful moment too, like the way she kissed him and said, "I'm sorry, I love you, I'm sorry." He's like, "Sorry for what?" And then she starts tearing his arm off, and oh god damn, what a heart-wrenching moment. And to see her afterwards sort of cuddling him and consoling him, being like it's okay, because they're not just crewmates, remember, they're all lovers, they're in a polyamorous relationship. So that was really powerful too. But you do have to remember, in the world of the Expanse, that the technology does exist to regrow arms. So he doesn't have to be armless or lose one arm for the rest of his life. But whether or not Drummer and these belters with their poverty level have access to that kind of medical technology, well, that's another question I'm not sure of. Maybe so, maybe not. But either way, that the technology exists, as we saw in the very first episode of The Expanse, that someone can regrow limbs. So hopefully he will eventually get access to that technology. So, but yeah, it was still a very powerful moment. And then, so they pull off the heist, but Drummer, of course, is very upset she lost a couple of people. One of Walker's men got killed, and Joseph, of course, lost his arm, and this, of course, pissed Drummer off. So she decided to send out a broadcast on wide band, so anyone can listen to it. And in fact, she probably wants everyone in the belt to listen to it. And this broadcast reminded me of, for those Deep Space Nine fans, it reminded me a lot of Damar's speech at the end of season 7 of Deep Space Nine, where he first built the resistance. He's like, resist today, resist tomorrow. It's like such a powerful speech that really got you like excited. That's what Drummer's speech felt like to me, even though the context is different, because in there Damar was revealing himself as an opposition, as a resistance. But here, like, Marco's already aware that Drummer is an enemy and that she's resisting him. But here, I guess, in this sense, he kind of saw her as someone on the run, like a prey that he, the hunter, was hunting after. But here, she's making herself known as an equal predator, that she can hit back at him just as hard, and she's letting him know that, and she wants him to know that it was her. Frankly, and she wants the belt to know. and she wants to call. And I love how she said this message is for the traitor, the coward, Marco Anaru. And I think she's going to elicit a lot. She's going to gain support from the belt, because the belt is already starting to question Marco for leaving Ceres behind, which she calls out. And so she calls him out even further. And makes a point, and also makes it clear to the belt, because many of the belt might be following him because they feel they have no other choice. And so she starts to make it clear to the belt that they do have another choice, that they can support her. And goddamn, that was just so good. That was so powerful. And I love how well, she did say, like, I was a bit questioning the way she said, we're unbroken. That made me think, of course, of that terrible Game of Thrones episode with the sand snakes. So I was just, like, cringe when she said that. But really, it was probably a call out to the Song of Ice and Fire novels, where that saying was, House Martell and Dorne, which was better, like, in the books than it was the show. So that's probably what they were calling out to, because the authors and producers of the show, Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, had both worked with George R.R. Martin before, so that probably was an intentional call out to that. But anyway, that was I just absolutely loved that scene. It was amazing. So next, we'll get into the Marco Anaru's storyline. And so first, we see Marco ordering the deaths of, like, I can't remember exactly what positions, maybe gunman and navigator or something on the ship that got disabled, which is a dick move. And when Rosenfeld tries to protest, he interrupts her and say, "Oh, and if the captain tries to argue with him, kill him too." Which is, not only is that a dick move, that's more than just a dick move. It's a bad leadership. And that's why Rosenfeld was calling him out on that. But of course, he's just an asshole and refused to listen to her. But she does space the two men, which she was ordered to. And so Marco's like, "Oh, did the captain protest?" And she's like, "Yeah." "So you spaced him too, right?" And she's like, "No." And he was like, "That's insubordination," and getting all pissed off. And then she's like, "Well, no, because I'm looking after your image, because it makes you appear weak. But you're not weak. You're Marco. You roll with the punches." Like, she's actually really good at manipulating him, and that's because she's the only person willing to stand up for him. Now, if I do recall, I think this does make her very different from her book counterpart. It's been a while since I read this book, but I recall that person being a lot more sort of idiotic and cowardly. So I love that she's like willing to stand up to him and show him what's what. But yeah, even though she stopped him from killing the captain, he still never should have killed those two people. It shows him as a ruthless dictator, and it's gonna hurt him in the long run. Like, he's just hurting himself more, and shows that it's really illustrating that he's not a great leader, and that's really gonna hit him hard. But now we get into Phillips' storyline, which was my least favorite part of the aspect of the storyline. This is the thing I thought dragged on too long, especially considering that this season's only 6 episodes short. I feel like this storyline could have been shorter, and to make time for more important stuff. I hope the next 2 episodes don't feel rushed, because they spent too much time on this. Now, granted, I did get the point of it, and I did appreciate the point of it, that it was starting to change Philip's mind by talking to some of the lower grunts, or the every guy, per se, and getting their perspective, and he's starting to realize what makes him happy, and starting to realize that the kind of life he's chosen isn't necessarily for him. But it dragged on too long. Like, we did not need that much of it. And the part with the torpedo, when the guy was like being an asshole, it's like, "Oh, it's gonna go off." Like, that's very reckless of him, for number one. Number two, we didn't really need that, in my opinion. Like, they could have cut that out. They could have made this shorter. And this is the part, yeah. So this I appreciate it, but it dragged on for too long. We did not need this bunch of this. This is part of the episode that kind of sunk it a little bit for me. But the ending was powerful when they were watching Drummer's message in the mess hall, and Philip instantly reverts to being the wrong, the asshole, wrong person that he should be. Because he gets all pissed off because of it and saying, because, the guy he was talking with is like, well, at least it wasn't the Earth that attacked us, and he gets all pissed off. He's like, Drummer is an enemy just as much as the Earth is, and blah, we're at war, blah, blah, blah. So he reverts. All that progress that he made becoming a better person, gone, and he reverts to being the soulless, mindless, revolutionary following who's just going to imitate his father. So that was a sort of an interesting backstep for Philip's character. So it will be interesting to see where we go with this going forward. So my rating for Redoubt out of 10 is going to be a 9 excellent. I nearly gave this episode an 8 just because of the Phillips stuff I thought dragged on for too long. But then when examining the episode, I saw that all the other stuff was really good. So I gotta give it a 9. Like the conversations between Holden and Amos, between Holden and Naomi, and Holden and Clarissa were all like really powerful. The stuff with Monica slowly starting to convince Alpha Sorella to do the right thing was amazing. The stuff on Laconia, as I said, I love Duarte. We got Duarte. It was so good. And and of course the stuff with Drummer, you son of a bitch, I'm in. It was amazing. And then her Damar speech was so good. So I do have to give this episode a 9. Excellent. But yeah, the Phillips stuff did kind of bring it down a bit for me. Anyway, that is it for my review of Season 6, Episode 4 of The Expanse. And as per usual, I'll be doing a live discussion with Darren from D's Reviews this Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Link for that will be in the description below. You can check us out live or watch us in the archives. Either way would be very much appreciated. Also, be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover The Expanse, as well as covering other shows like All Things Star Trek, covering Star Trek Prodigies starting up soon, and also Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.